Hello and welcome to Aging Insights. I'm Melissa Chalker, Executive Director of the New Jersey Foundation for Aging. As you can see, we're still practicing social distancing and staying at home. We're so grateful for the opportunity to continue producing the show and for finding people who are willing to join us in this new way. Be sure to stay tuned at the end of this episode for more tips from Dr. Claire Mulry. We've certainly had to make some adjustments, and I'm sure you have too. During COVID-19, many things have changed for all of us. Perhaps you're assisting with the care of a grandchild or trying to stay connected virtually with your family. Today, we're joined by Dr. Charisse Smith, who holds a Ph.D. in education and is an instructional coach at the Hamilton Township School District. She assists students and teachers and parents and grandparents with many activities during the school year, and especially now as they're switching to learning virtually. She also serves as a board member for the New Jersey Foundation for Aging, and we're so happy to have her here with us today to talk about the challenges and opportunities in assisting children with their learning. Hi, Charisse. Thank you so much for joining us. Really happy to have you today to talk about something really interesting, I think, for our audience. But first, I want to give our audience a little bit of an idea of who you are. So perhaps you could just introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background, and we'll talk also about how you got involved with NJFA.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Well, my name is Charisse Smith, and I am an educator in New Jersey for over 30 years in Trenton and Hamilton Township, Mercer County, New Jersey. I'm also an educational consultant with Sankofa Educational Consulting, LLC, here in New Jersey.
Great. And I know through that work, you do a lot of work, obviously, with teachers, with students, with parents and grandparents, obviously.
Yeah.
And you are, as I mentioned, involved with NJFA. You're one of our board members, and we're so happy to have you in that capacity as well. Give us a little bit of a history of how you became involved in NJFA and how you found out about us, actually.
Well, actually, it was under not so great circumstances. My uncle Carl West passed away, and I was approached by one of your board members to add my expertise to NJFA. And I was like, well, how can I, as an educator of young children, be a part of this organization? And it started that way, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a really, as you said, sort of a sad beginning, but also an opportunity for us to bring somebody to the board with a unique experience like yours in education that we haven't really had before. But so happy to continue the family legacy of what your Uncle Carl West started in being one of our founding trustees. So we're happy to have you on board in a number of capacities. But first and foremost today, obviously, what we're going to talk about is your capacity as an educator and as a consultant in the field of education. And we know that there are so many older adults out there that might be interacting with their grandchildren or other young people in their life in a variety of capacities, right? So if you could talk a little bit maybe about, from your experience in education, what you see in terms of older adults and whether they're raising grandchildren or assisting with the care of grandchildren and how that intersects with their education.
Yeah, well, it all started with just caregiving in general and teachers as caregivers. And that's actually how I started to weave what I do into what the organization does. And I found that teachers were caregivers for multiple populations, for their own kids, for their aging older adults in their households and their grandparents, their parents. And in the schools that I work with, we have a majority of our students who are being raised by their grandparents. So that's an extra, I would say, bonus to to our students and to our schools to have our grandparents as a part of our teaching partnership, actually.
Right. And as you mentioned, I'm sure other districts across New Jersey also experience this, where they might have a majority or some instances of grandparents who are raising grandchildren, and the general challenges that might bring to their life in that older adult who's managing a young child's education and their other duties, whether they might be caring for a spouse or another person in the house. And then you add to that this, what COVID-19 did to the education system, right? And making everybody switch to virtual and figuring that out. Can you talk a little bit about the additional challenge that might bring for a grandparent who's assisting a grandchild with their learning?
Yes, absolutely. So technology alone has been a very large mountain that many of us have had to climb. And especially for those populations who are not that tech savvy or comfortable
Mhm.
with technology, let alone having to care for a young child or several children in the home,
Mhm.
running the home, and then caring for maybe a spouse or another person in the home. So we
Mhm.
found a need in our community to help and support our older adults who are taking care of younger children in the household. So through these coaching corners, which I created every Friday at 3:30,
Mhm.
we would help grandparents and parents and other caregivers to help with do's and don'ts of remote learning, providing some inspiration, and also tips on self-care as well. It's a lot that's going on in these households, and we found that they needed support. They needed our support.
Sure. Can you give us an example of maybe of some of those tips that, I particular when you said do's and don'ts, I was intrigued there. So could you tell us a little bit about some of the do's and don'ts maybe you've shared with older adults?
Well, having your student getting up and get dressed, starting a
Hmm.
routine in the morning. Our students are very regimented in the morning, and just having that time between 10 and 2 o'clock to have a schedule,
Hmm.
and have that schedule set. So getting up and getting dressed, getting a good breakfast,
Hmm.
starting your day off for learning, starting a day of learning as well.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice in helping the students to maintain some structure because that can be hard.
Yeah,
And then as we,
that is one of the biggest problematic areas that we are finding now is just setting a schedule
Mhm.
for the day. For the day.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's helpful as well, as we mentioned that these grandparents might have other caregiving duties, and to know that this is the time that we need to help the student, and that if they're busy and occupied now, I can get this other work done. And so the structure is good for everybody, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And could you maybe share an example with us of some of the folks you've worked with and maybe some of the unique experiences or challenges or lessons they've learned in
Yes.
this process?
Well, what comes to mind, or who comes
Mhm.
to mind, is Mrs.
Mhm.
Jones in Hamilton Township, Mercer County. I met her and her grandson in the dollar store, and they were picking up pens and pencils, and I could hear her frustration about, "Oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to get." And I said, "Well, can I help?" And she mentioned that she was at my particular school, and I was like, "Oh, wonderful!" So our conversation started there, and then she was telling me about that she's caring for a sick spouse, and that she's taking care of her grandson. And both of the grandson's parents are not able to care for him. So her
Mhm.
and I, we sparked up a very nice relationship. So throughout the school year, I would give her some tips and information, send
Mhm.
home books, and just having conversations and
Mhm.
encouraging her to keep doing what she's doing, that she's doing a wonderful job. And I think that's many of our grandparents are not sure that they're doing a great job, and
Mhm.
they actually really are. Even just the social conversations between a child and an adult are
Mhm.
extremely important.
Sure.
So when COVID hit and we moved from paper packets to actual online learning, that was another stressful piece that was added to Mrs. Jones' life.
Mhm.
And I was there again for her to say, "You're doing a wonderful job." We walk through going through a Zoom lesson or a Google Meets lesson,
Mhm.
letting her know that she's doing fine, she's doing well,
Mhm.
and to keep going and not to give up. She was very discouraged that she
Mhm.
wasn't tech savvy enough. She didn't know what she was doing. She was getting frustrated. And I said, sometimes you just need to take a break and disengage. Take care of your family first,
Mhm.
and then move back to the remote learning and do what you can. Do what you can.
Yeah. Yeah, and that sounds like probably some of the advice you've been giving in your coaching corners when you talked about self-care earlier, right? And the
Absolutely.
importance of understanding that you're trying your best and that's enough, right?
That is.
And
And then,
to
and also to let her know that some of the things that she's doing around the house is also helpful for his education. So we're
absolutely.
talking about cooking, we're talking about reading what's on the back of cereal boxes, just small things, everyday things that encourage
Mhm.
encourage learning.
Right. And I think that's a great point because in addition to those grandparents who might be solely responsible for the care of a young child, we also know that there are a lot of grandparents who maybe are just assisting while there might be the parents who are, essential workers or still going, going out to work
Mhm,
or otherwise busy with work,
mhm.
or who might just desire to stay engaged with their grandchildren during this time. So, what sort of things have you seen in that capacity, or what advice can you give to grandparents who maybe aren't, as I said, solely responsible for the care of that child, but are just trying to stay engaged and help?
Reading is a wonderful activity that a grandparent can do for a grandchild, to
Mhm.
stay engaged. Having those conversations about comprehension. Well, what did you learn about the story? Well, is
Mhm.
there a different ending that we can add to the story? So just small pieces like that are wonderful experiences to stay engaged. Also, learning how to Zoom,
Yes.
learning how to use Google Meets, um, participating in a video together with your grandchild. So there's YouTube, there's TikTok.
Mhm.
There's a lot of fun ways that you can incorporate technology into learning, just as a beginner as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Are there any particular resources you would recommend for older adults who are looking to learn about a virtual thing like Zoom or other platform? Are there resources and
Well,
tools that
school districts across New Jersey have come up with wonderful videos on how to Zoom, how to
Mhm.
log into Zoom. So,
Mhm.
YouTube actually is one of the best places to
Mhm.
look for tutorials on how to Zoom, how to use Google Meets.
Mhm.
Some are not as good as others, but looking for the ones from school districts are the best resources. They're
That's
really geared toward helping out parents
mhm.
to log on
Mhm.
into Google platforms. One would be Google Classrooms that many school districts are using
Oh.
to assign assignments
Mhm.
and to provide other resources for students.
Sure. No, that's great. I'm sure there are many people who have can speak to the influence of older adults in their lives, whether it was a grandparent or other relative. And so it's nice to know that even during this time, there are ways that we can connect with older adults or with the young people in our lives, so everybody can stay engaged, right? And
Absolutely.
stay, keep.
Even if it's from room to room. So if you have a computer in your room and your grandchild is in another room, to even just practice zooming with each other. It's hilarious. It's
That's
fun,
great.
but it's also learning as well. So the grandparent or other older adult who is trying to navigate this whole remote learning can kind
Mhm.
of practice on their own, but still have
Mhm.
fun and be engaged with their grandchildren as well in the house.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so, summer is upon us, right? And so I know that you've dealt with assisting with coaching many grandparents or other folks who've needed assistance while their children are learning now. But in the summer, what can people be doing to make sure that students stay engaged and don't fall behind on their learning over the summer? Are there activities or other, again, resources or tools they can find online of fun things they can do over the summer?
Yes, there's several out there. Storybook Online is one that
Mhm.
teachers are recommending highly. These are books that are read out loud. ABC Mouse is another one
Okay.
that students really enjoy learning from.
Mhm.
And not even so much technology, but just everyday games. The game of jacks is a
Mm.
wonderful way for younger students to learn about grouping numbers together, which is called subitizing,
Mhm.
and just discrete counting, learning to take your turn. So when we come back to school, a lot of what teachers and administrators are concerned about is the social emotional learning that is missing at this time.
Mhm.
So engaging, having conversations. I know it sounds small, but it's really, really, really important
Mhm.
that students are engaged verbally and emotionally with another human being.
Mhm.
Cooking as well, pulling out cookbooks, pulling out recipes like Yumly, which
Mhm.
has pictures and the actual recipe online as well. So going back and forth, so you can either print them out or look on the computer or tablet to engage learning as well. Khan Academy is another one. These are free resources
Mhm.
for students to use
Mhm.
as well. as well.
Yeah.
And I would dare to say that many of the school districts already have online resources for students to go to. Many of the companies have graciously opened up their platforms to extend through the summer. So please take advantage of those as well. They've done a lot of teasing out of some of the things that are not so appropriate, which can be dangerous with having a kid online by themselves.
Sure.
So the school districts have done a really good job of providing resources of where kids can go online. So that would be my first choice, is take a look at what your district has provided, and then some of the other resources that I mentioned as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. A great recommendation to first check with your school district, because they might be providing a particular link that they're using or might have particular recommendations.
Absolutely.
And then obviously those free resources that are out there. And wonderful to hear people are extending that throughout the summer, because I'm sure as an educator, you would tell us that summer is already challenging with
Yeah.
maintaining a structure and kids being ready to come back to the school year and start with that. But this year it's particularly challenging because they've had so much time off of school, technically physically off of being in the building, and they've been learning differently. And so that social preparedness is different.
Yes, yes. So our summer slide, the sliding board is a lot longer this year. So helping to combat summer slide, I don't want to call it COVID slide, but that's exactly what
Yeah.
we're doing, or what's
Mhm.
happening right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to kind of keep kids engaged, keep yourself engaged,
Yeah.
as well, is
Mhm.
beneficial for the entire family.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's great. And, I do, like your suggestions of playing games and doing other things to keep that structure and that activity,
Mhm.
and to keep things fun, right? Because
Absolutely.
the other thing during this time, when, we might be isolated or things might be changing, it might be difficult for kids mentally to also digest all of this and process it. So, keeping things fun and making sure that that they understand what's happening, and that they aren't developing, too many fears and those sort of things, right? That's another layer of responsibility that older adults might have in
Mhm.
assisting
Mhm.
with the care or caring for
Mhm.
children in their household, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think these are all terrific pieces of advice, Charisse. Really thankful that you've been able to share that with us. In thinking about preparing for the fall, one thing I wanted to ask you about that I forgot earlier was within those resources, do schools give out reading lists still? Are there books that, that they're recommending for reading over the summer, or
They
how?
haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah.
We're just trying to prepare what is September going to look like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know they have different scenarios on how school would open, um, but to do our part at home is
Hmm.
essential. It's really essential. So we encourage, again, the reading at home, playing simple games at home, cooking, and now everyone's eating. So, so we really have to pay attention to those small teachable moments that we've taken for granted as parents
Hmm.
and grandparents for many years. But now they need to be moved to the forefront.
So you've given us a lot of really great tips of, how to stay engaged over the summer and prepare for the fall, and you've listed a number of resources. Are there any additional resources that you didn't get to mention yet that you'd like to direct people to?
No, I believe that the school districts, their
Mhm.
websites are chock full of information,
Mhm.
especially those that are particular to preschool or to elementary and middle and high school.
Mhm.
So I would recommend individuals to go to those websites
Mhm.
first.
Right.
They have spent quite a bit of time researching different sites that are appropriate for each particular
Mhm.
grade level, and
Yeah.
keeping aligned with the standards as well.
Sure.
There's a lot out there,
Mhm.
and again, they've done a wonderful job of putting all of
Mhm.
these resources together.
Sure. That's terrific. And thanks for mentioning different grade levels, because that's something that I didn't think to add into there.
Mhm.
And I would assume there might be different approaches, because, keeping a teenager engaged might be a little more challenging. Yes.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes,
Do
indeed.
you have any tips for older adults and how to connect with their teenage grandchildren?
Well, I believe that even just having conversations, reading the newspaper online,
Mm-hmm.
and having conversations. There's a lot going on in the world now.
Yes.
And I think having that dialogue between yourself and the children in the home,
Mhm.
and actually closing the laptops, disengaging from technology. I know we are really dependent on technology now. We
Mhm.
don't want to lose that piece as well of just
Mhm.
having conversations and
Mhm.
expressing your feelings right now. I know that our secondary students are having a difficult time because they're not able to engage with their friends
Mhm.
on a regular basis like they used to. So I think we really need to look at right now the social emotional piece of our
Mhm.
students. I
Mhm.
believe that comes primary to our to the academics right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again for bringing that up because it is important to make sure that we're taking care of these students in a holistic way, right? Not just
Absolutely.
their education.
The Mindfulness Institute is another resource that
Mhm.
has resources for parents as well, with talking to your child,
Mhm.
working with children who have disabilities at home
Mhm.
as well. So that's
Right.
another resource for that
Sure.
social emotional piece.
Hmm. And I would imagine you mentioned cooking several times, which is a great opportunity to engage and, as you said, follow directions and look at pictures and look what we created and look what we did. And there's so many lessons in there. But since we are eating a little more, it might be good to also get out and exercise.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, YouTube is a wonderful place to find these websites. But also, don't forget our gym teachers at school.
Yes.
They are providing wonderful resources for
Hmm.
students online, as well as our other specialty area teachers, like our
Hmm.
music teachers. There's
Hmm.
lessons that are going online. Our
Hmm.
art teachers teachers are doing a lot of work. So I really keep going back to the fact of looking back at your school district
Hmm.
and using the resources that they have put together. They're getting really good at putting them together for
Yeah.
families.
That's great. I'm glad that you've reminded our audience again to do that because there may be specific things from their district for those disciplines, for the art, for the music, for the exercise, for all those things.
You can't
And
forget
and
them.
and when in doubt, there's YouTube, right?
Yes. Carefully, you two.
Carefully,
But again,
carefully.
go back to the school district.
Yeah, yeah. Any last words of advice, Charisse, for the older adults who might be watching who really want to engage or are trying their best right now to help their students with learning?
I have to say, old school, the things that we did before television, the things that we did before the internet, playing cards, playing jacks, recipes, having conversations, reading fairy tales, um, reading novels,
Mhm.
having your own book club within your family,
Great idea.
across Zoom. Creates Our students are very tech savvy, and once we work together as a partnership, it
Mhm.
works out
Great,
very fine. And
great.
I would just encourage, you're doing fine. You are doing fine.
That's perfect words of advice to wrap up this conversation, Charisse. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I'm so grateful for your involvement in NJFA and all of the information and resources that you bring to us as an organization. So thanks for your time and for all these great tips.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
I'm just going to give you some really basic tips. Some of them are behavioral on your part, and others are environmental, things you can do to make your home safer. And so I'm just going to give you quick tips in this tip series from the New Jersey Foundation on Aging, and here we go. The first thing is don't rush. Most accidents are not planned. All accidents are not planned, hence the name. And most of them happen because we're rushing. So slow down is the first thing I'm going to say. That's a behavioral intervention you can do. The second thing you can do is wear proper footwear. But as long as they have a nice tread and they are not worn and they fit you, that is going to be key. If they're too big, you're probably going to fall. If they're too small, you'll take them off because you're uncomfortable and then you'll slip and fall. The other thing is dress for the weather, because if you're too cold, you're in a rush. And if you're too hot, you might get a little dehydrated and maybe get dizzy or lightheaded, and that could do it. Daily activities, your daily routines. We call them activities of daily living. And that could be anything from bathing and dressing to taking care of your pets, taking your dog for a walk, grocery shopping, paying your bills. Do those things. Do them every day. Clean your house. Pick one thing every day to clean your house in, and that's going to be good exercise for you. Keep your joints moving, your muscles strong, but keep those daily routines up. One of the biggest problems with falls is that you end up being afraid to fall, and therefore you restrict your movement. You get less walking in, therefore you have less cardiovascular energy, and you start to be at risk for more falls. And do some sort of exercise. You don't have to join a gym. Just doing the things around your house can really be well. Maybe walk around your house a couple of times a day, at least once an hour. Get up and move is good. Some people like to do Tai Chi or chair yoga. That works as well. And that's a really great way to make sure all of your muscles and joints go through the full range of motion so that they stay strong and healthy across your life. The other thing is most people over the age of 65 take at least 4 medications. Some take up to 15 or more. And it's important that you know what they are, know what their interactions are. So if you don't know what they are, bring them all in a bag to your pharmacist and have them tell you what the interactions of these meds are. Sometimes your cardiologist prescribes something, your neurologist prescribes something, general practitioners, and then maybe you take supplements or over-the-counter medications that can also interact. So make sure you're reading all those instructions, and if you're not sure, spend some time with your pharmacist. They'd love to tell you about it. And many of the drugs, like some of you might take what we call a diuretic or a water pill to get some of the fluid off if you've had cardiovascular or kidney disease. So you may not hydrate because you're afraid that you're gonna have to rush to the bathroom, but just put those things into your daily routine so that doesn't have to happen. Having enough water in your system makes sure that you don't get dizzy or lightheaded. And it makes sure that you have enough blood volume that you don't feel like you're going to fall. So hydrating, particularly in the upcoming summer months, is going to be really, really important. And if you should drink the occasional glass of alcohol, glass of wine, be careful about your the implications if you're drinking it in the sun or the implications with your medication. Something as simply as having your tooth extracted and then drinking a glass of wine can really mess with your balance and potentially make you fall. The other thing is watch out for caffeine. A little bit's okay, but it's also dehydrates you, and that can lead to less blood volume, which could lead to dizziness or lightheadedness. And then our blood sugar. Some of us, when our blood sugar dips, we get a little dizzy or lightheaded and we might pass out. So those are the things you can do to make sure you don't fall and you're safe at home.
Thank you for watching this episode of Aging Insights. For more information and to watch previous episodes, please visit our website at www.njfoundationforaging.org and click on the Aging Insights page. We hope that you enjoyed this episode and learned something new from Charisse. I know I did. In fact, I learned something new every time I speak with her. And remember, to find out about senior services in your area, please contact your county office on aging. Their phone numbers can be found on our website as well, or you can call the state hotline at 1-877-222-3737. They're here for you, especially now during this time. Thanks for watching, and be sure to tune in next time.